Thank you again for having me. I want to talk about you can't come back if you don't get up. And that's the title of a keynote that I give when I'm out around the country talking to different groups. And it starts with a story. And the story is about an old gentleman about 90 years old who wondered his whole life if there was anybody out there that had been free of adversity. And through 80 years, 85 years, 88 years, he didn't find anybody. And he said, you know, before I'm done on this earth, I am going to, as long as my body will last, I'm going to continue this journey and this research of mine until I can either say yes or no. He spent the last 2 years of his life going house to house. He had an old, tattered notebook, and he kept all the results in there of the homes he went to, what had happened in those homes, and he would come back defeated almost at the end of the day and say, no, I didn't find anybody. He came down to the very last day. He said, I'm going to give it one more day. He did, and as you can imagine, he couldn't find anybody. So I want to briefly cover 4 truths with you on adversity. These truths come from my personal and professional life, although I'm not going to tell you my story. I'm going to tell it to you, though, within these 4 truths. The first truth is that nobody is exempt. And I'm talking about everything from a stub toe to the most horrific tragedy, and unfortunately, we've probably all had one of those or more than one of those in our life. We were talking about grandchildren, and I couldn't help immediately to think about, you know, some things in my journey, okay, that related to that. So, why me and why adversity? Why did I pick this topic? There are other topics. You coach basketball as long as I did, and you can come up with some pretty good leadership topics. You can come up with some pretty good locker room stories. In fact, I'm working on a presentation called What Happens at Halftime that I think people might be pretty interested in. I've worked for 7 head coaches, so I've coached all over the country. And that in itself is something I've worked on. There are multiple topics, but the one I love the most and is near and dear to me is this talk on adversity. Why me? Why me? Because I ended my coaching career in 2003. Because of my behaviors, because of something I had done that basically ended my career. And I've gone through a really difficult period from 2003 until about 6 months ago. And I decided at that time that I was going to work for myself and I was going to kick off this speaking profession and also become a writer. And when I did, I thought, well, everybody has something that they're known for. And for me, without a question, it was this thing about tragedy, adversity, and adversity I had caused, and things that the world had just presented to me. And I thought, okay, I'll run with it. So, in order, I'll try to do this. This is kind of like going through my coaching career because I made so many stops. People ask me, well, where'd you coach? And it's a long story. It's a lot of schools. So why adversity and why me? In 1992, I was an assistant basketball coach at Miami of Ohio in Oxford, Ohio. And I was on the baseline, and I saw this fella come up from my right, and he was walking towards the floor. They were in the middle of practice, intense. We're really getting after it. And he got closer and closer to the floor, and I'm like, this guy he's getting close to getting in my turf. And I don't want anybody up here on this floor. And he walked up 6 feet from me. And he said, are you Randy Brown? And I said, yes. He goes, you need to come with me. And I went with him. I didn't want to. I was very, very perplexed as to why this guy would ask me to come with him. But I did. And he put me in his car, security card. We went up the hill. We went around the corner, and I knew instantly this was not going to end good. And he took me to the hospital, the local Memorial Hospital there in Oxford. And in the emergency room lie my daughter of 4 years and 1 day. And she had already passed. I just saw her 2 hours before this, at home. the most smiling, wonderful, bright-faced kid you can imagine. 4 years and a day. And I never got to talk to her again. And in that moment, all of the adversity in my past went away. And this one stood as the biggest challenge in my life. And I had to make a decision how I was going to respond to it. And I was knocked flat on my back, and could I get up? I got up. And my wife got up, thank goodness. Fast forward to 1995. I reached the number one goal in my coaching career that I'd set when I was 20 years old, and that's to be a Division I head basketball coach out of Fort Dodge, Iowa here. Something I'm really proud of today and always will be. And unfortunately, that job ended in me getting fired, losing my job. We moved back to Iowa. I'm not in a good place, okay? I'm not in a good place, and I can't get a coaching position. And there are a lot of things going on with me, from not grieving my daughter's death to the anger of losing a job, all mixed up together. And my wife said, you need to go see the doc. And I went to see the doc, and I told him my story, and he kind of chuckled. He said, this is called clinical depression, and you've got it. Gave me some medication, laughed it off, didn't take it, off we go. I was in a really bad place. 4 months later, after a beautiful day in the snow, we have 3 kids at that time. They're all in one lazy boy chair. And our little Natalie, 3.5-year-old Natalie, I looked at her and I knew that she was suffering from the same quick-acting disease that her sister Meredith had. And in a matter of hours, she ended up passing away in an emergency room in Iowa City after being airlifted from Waterloo. So, again, flat on our back, numb. I wanted to check out. There's one thing I do when I speak. I'm very frank. I mean, I've looked at suicide right down the middle. And after losing a second child, I wanted out of this thing because I didn't sign up for either one of them. My wife got up and I got up. You got to get up. If you're going to come back, you got to get up. And followed that was a series of pretty amazing things that happened. One of which, I talked about the depression, which I still battle with to this day, but got a chance to go to Iowa State to coach basketball. And that was awesome. That was really good. But I want to go back. I want to rewind the tape a little bit. And this is what number 2, 3, and 4 are going to be when I cover those really briefly. Is that when these things happened to me, okay, I had a choice. Number 2 is, do we respond or do we react? And I always kid and I say, well, when you stub your toe in the dark, you've got to react. I mean, you just don't stand there after contemplating for a nice period of time and all of a sudden start the profanity and whatever else you do when you stub your toe, right? I mean, that's got to be a reaction. But when something happens to you that was outside of your grasp, and they've happened to everybody, from hitting a ball out of bounds on the country club up here to losing someone near and dear to you. My reactions are horrible. Evaluate your reactions. My responses are usually pretty good. When the boss comes in and gives you an evaluation or a comment on something that you had worked really, really hard on, and it wasn't a very positive evaluation, what is the first thing that you might want to do? If your child, who's supposed to be home at midnight, comes home at 12:25, comes through the door, what is the first thing you do? See where I'm going? Respond, react. We're not talking about stubbing a toe. When something with great gravity in your life happens, adversity, do you respond or do you react? And you might say, well, what's so important about that? Here's what's important about that. I got really good at not responding properly. When you do that, you tend to get really good at what I call hide and seek. I'm going to go hide. I'm going to run as fast as I can. I didn't grieve either one of my child's deaths. You know what I did? I worked harder. I worked harder. And when you're in this field of college basketball and you're working 90 hours anyway, just standard stuff and travel and recruiting, to work harder means you're pretty much working all the time. That's what I did. Because I had to mentally check out, because the only way I could survive, I thought, was to be able to work harder. Alcohol, what a great release for me. A great release. I was never the guy that could have a couple beers and sit around, have a good time, and go home. Okay? I was the extremist. I was the guy that if I'm going to sit down and have 2 or 3, you might as well have more, you might as well have more. And as of the other day, I'm 4 years sober. Thank goodness to some treatment that I had through an intervention my brother did. I'm very, very grateful for that. That didn't happen to me. That happened because I responded poorly to what had happened to me. And that's why I think it's very important to talk about and have you all think about response versus react. Very important. While at Iowa State, in January of 2003, and we had a great run at Iowa State. We won back-to-back Big 12 championships, sending guys to the NBA. We got as far as the Elite Eight in 2000 with that great team that we had, and just record-setting years. And in 2003, my life changed forever. Again. 2 federal agents walked into my office. They began a dialogue with me. I knew exactly what they wanted and what they were asking about. For 6 years, I had lived a secret life that only I knew about on the internet at night with pornography. You have to work like crazy to do that, to keep that from everybody in your life, myself and my maker. For 6 years, you have no idea how relieved I was to know that I had 2 federal postal agents in my office and that my world was going to take a complete turn. And it did. And that's the last day I coached. And that was 14 years ago. I am so thankful that happened, not because of what it's caused, but because of where my life was at the time. That whole situation with that accumulated in 2 years of federal prison, which I served to the best of my ability. I don't recommend it for anybody. And I talk about this in my book, and I talk about this when I speak, when I do like a 60-minute keynote that, I went to prison so you don't have to. Part of my message is not to tell you what to do, but just to tell you what a guy did and how some stuff worked out and other things worked out horribly because of the way that I handled either things that I had control over or things I didn't have control over. You talk about being knocked on your ass. My family, my wife, everybody. But we got up. I got up from that. 2 years ago, almost to the date, my wife in a therapy session after 32 years of marriage indicated that she wanted to finish up the last chapter of her life without me and asked for a brief separation and a divorce. You talk about being knocked on the ground, knocked on your butt after 32 years. Obviously, a lot of the pain and heartache I was responsible for, and I get that, and I own that. And that's why I'm here in front of a bunch of strangers talking about it, because I own it. I have to. And I wasn't sure if I was going to get up from that one, but I got up. And I'm upright right now, which it feels good, actually. Okay? The wounds have not healed, especially the two with my daughters. Those don't heal. Through getting wiser, other things heal, things that I've done. The soothing, the comforting, the running. And then a mask. Number 3. We all have a mask. I don't know if anybody brought theirs today. I decided to leave mine at home. Sometimes I'll wear it on Sunday. Sometimes, and I try not to wear it very much. We all have one. That's what I put on when I wasn't myself, when I wasn't that true, transparent guy. I put on the mask, I went and run and hid and did the things I didn't want anybody to know that I was doing. Because they made me feel better. And they came at a huge cost. Please don't run, and please don't try to do it by yourself. You know, that's a thing that wherever I go, I plead with people. I really do. You know, if you can, take a message or two and just stick it in your pocket and take it with you today and just kind of think about it. You know, meditate over it a little bit. Say, what was this guy trying to say? Man, what a mountain of stuff he had. And he caused most of it. How did he get through that? Where did he stumble? And it might be able to help you. Okay, if you have a mask, I would really, you know, the best thing to do with a mask is just give it to somebody and say, I don't ever want to see it again. Because if you try to bury it, it's always going to come back. It's like toxins that they put deep, deep, deep in the earth when they were trying to get rid of that nuclear waste. Well, that stuff always rises to the top. And when it gets to the top, it looks bad and it stinks. So if you have something like that, I'll guarantee you it's going to come back and it's going to resurface. And it won't be good. And then the fourth thing is to share, I think we have an obligation. I don't know about, and you can think about this, but when I grew up, you know, the first thing that happened, I remember that was pretty traumatic, was my grandmother died. Well, Kat died, and then my grandmother died. You know, and that was big stuff. You know, when you're growing up, you don't know what adversity is. But when you were a youngster, anybody talked to you about making the right decision when something happens that's out of your control? Man, there's a lot of horrible stuff going on in this world. This is a hurting world. There are so many young people that can't deal with life that end up doing all kinds of things, right? And that's really what I'm talking about. Are they responding or are they reacting to what's going on in their life? Share this with them. I think it's a tremendous gift with young people if we could share some of these things with them and get them to pause and say, when A happens, don't go to B right away. When A happens, just step back, take a look, take a deep breath, think it through, and do the right thing. And don't do it on your own. Comfort people who need help. I don't know why we have such a problem with that. Well, they're upset. I really don't want to go talk to them. That's when they need you most. And share this good news with other people and with youngsters. I think it's a great, great gift that we can give them. I think it's tremendous. I haven't talked anything about spirituality. I'm a Christian. Obviously, there is a thread that weaves through everything I've said since I turned the mic on that are a big part of this puzzle, but in a short period of time, I've decided what I can do is share those 4 little stories with you. Those all come from me and through me, but I think they all touch everybody. They have touched you, they will touch you, and they're going to touch your kids and your grandkids. And we live in a world where we are good at creating ways to make ourselves feel good. And instead of going to therapy and instead of handling grief head on, which I should have, I just decided to take another route, an easy route, a softer route, the path of least resistance. And for me, it didn't work out very well. Fortunately for me, I'm here to be in front of you folks and share a few words today, which makes me feel really, really good. And someone said, why in the world would you go out and talk to people about stuff that you've done that you're probably really embarrassed about? I said, because I did it. I did it. You go sit for 2 years, where I did in the trees of North Carolina, and you'll figure some stuff out. And the best way for me to own it, if I have a message that I think is genuine that can help people, is for me to do what I'm doing right now. It'd be really easy to just to tuck it over there, but I know that's not